another episode of Dropout Drop-In. I am your host, producer Liz, who's been watching the whole time, and we're back with another panel this week for a very special conversation on Dimension 20. Now, usually on the show, we talk about everything that goes on at Dropout per the week before, but to set up the rest of the episodes coming at us and talking about Fantasy High and Dimension 20 and the evolution of Dropout, it's important to pause and talk about what these shows are actually doing in the spaces that they're in. So we thought, what better time to pause than with a egg and jam-filled adventuring party and a roll the dice special episode for the Intrepid Heroes. And with me to dig into everything that's happening this season on Fantasy High and in the world of Dimension 20 are two incredible people in not only the Dropout, but the actual play zones. The unofficial, official Dropout reporter, Jordon Brown. Hi, Jordon Brown. How are you doing?
Hi, so good. Happy to be back.
Happy to be back. Week 2, Jordon and Liz trying to convince the world that people are talking about Dropout. And speaking of convincing the world that there are good reporters out there doing important work, we have the absolutely incredible interviewer, journalist, and co-founder of the brand new launched Rascal News, Rowan Z. Hello, Rowan!
Ooh, hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk Dimension 20. This is incredible. Yeah, no, I'm real excited. I think a lot more people need to be looking at this as critical art that deserves real artistic attention. So I'm so glad that y'all are starting this.
It's important to bring people who not only watch this content, but who are employed to talk about and cover and analyze this content together to do our jobs in a way that can help people understand that there is more to discuss than just the fun of watching television and the fun of watching these shows. It's a genre, it's a medium, it's something that deserves critical analysis.
Yes, go off.
Yes.
Preach queen.
And we have to give you a round. I'm going to copy what Jordon just did. And for the audio only listeners, now Jordon just did a circular round of applause. And now I'm also doing it to Rowan.
This to you, Rowan. This is
To you, Rowan, and your team. You launched Rascal News last week, which is an incredible contribution and addition to the journalist space, not only around Dimension 20, but about this entire medium. But I don't need to tell you about that. Do you want to fill the people in on what you launched last week and maybe give a sense of what's coming?
Yeah, sure. So last week, me, Chase Carter, and Lynn Codega launched a new worker-owned, reader-funded journalism outlet called Rascal News. We kind of took in the tradition of Defector, Aftermath, 404 Media, where instead of having corporate funding, we are not beholden to SEO or ad sponsorships or anything like that. We get to write about whatever we want to write about because the community is supporting us. It is honestly bewildering. This is, as of recording, 6 days after launch, so my brain is truly a stick of butter. That is a subtle plug for an article that was released today by Chase Carter on games that represent the ADHD experience. You should subscribe to Rascal to read it.
Hey, what's the URL if someone wanted to go check out Rascal News?
Oh, if someone wanted to go check out Rascal News, they could just go check out rascal.news.
Oh, that's
Wow.
a good URL.
It's a real strong URL. Yeah, very excited. We are punky, we are an all-queer, mostly trans newsroom, and we are so excited to look at this medium that is developing and growing and show off the people who are actually doing some earth-shattering stuff. And also we're going to be reporting on labor journalism, we're going to be reporting on business and holding people in power accountable. There's so much coming on, and we're trying to connect the global tabletop role-playing game community with people in Southeast Asia and people in the global South, South America. So we are doing everything we can to show that this realm and this medium and this sphere is so much bigger than what we think it can be.
100%. Yes. And if that's something that those of you listening want to go support, there are so many ways to support rascal.news, and I will put the link to, you had a wonderful announcement kind of launch post that you put up that kind of outlines some of what you just said and ways for people to support. So that will be in the description of wherever you are watching or listening to this episode if you want to read more and learn about how to support and get involved. And that's
Can I share my favorite thing that happened in the last week? It's only kind of related to Dropout, but very specifically related to this. So I made a Reddit post where I was like, "Hey, we're gonna I'm doing this thing with Liz. We're super in it. I'm committed for the long haul of I want to talk about this forever. But It's so Rowan, you were included in my list of like, this is who we plan to have on. Who else should we look into getting? And people made a bunch of really fantastic suggestions, like a dream guest of getting like D20 Closet. Oh man, I want to talk to D20 Closet
D20
so
Closet,
bad.
if you are watching or listening, get in
Yeah.
our DMs. We're ready to host you.
And someone in the comments said, Jordon Brown, he does great work on TikTok and Patreon. And it melted my heart so much because someone replied, like, this is so wholesome. And then several people were like, hey, man, you should really check out who the original poster of this thread is. It really made my week.
You are a very important figure in this space. I messaged you when I posted my first thing, my very first TTRPG video about Brennan and how I was like, a lot of this work that I'm doing that I think like people would even care about is because I saw you talking about it and people garnering attention about it. I was like, oh, people give a shit about this. So yeah, I should do it. So Jordon Brown in
Oh no.
Round of
Oh no.
applause
This
to
isn't what I
Jordon
wanted.
Brown.
I don't do well with
this isn't what I
compliments.
wanted. No, don't compliment my work. What you're doing is so impressive, both of you. And that's, again, if you're listening for the first time or you're new to the Dropout Drop-In, this is a brand new podcast, visual podcast take on talking about Dropout specifically, and what Dropout is adding, not just to its own platform and the growth it is seeing individually, but within the TV space, the impact that Dropout's having. And I think we've kind of officially owned a tagline as per last week's episode, which is, this is a podcast dedicated to the promotion of Dropout getting an Emmy, and specifically Game Changer getting an Emmy. So this is the full steam ahead train of Game Changer is going to be an Emmy nominated show, and Jordon and Liz and Rowan and Marissa and everyone else that comes on the show is like, blowing the train's horn or whistle or whatever and making sure everyone is on the same page as us.
Choo choo.
Choo choo. I love it. Let's talk about Dimension 20 and just how special this show is. And I want to just start with some verbiage as someone that is coming into the conversation from not just a TV specific producer mindset and background, but my specialty as a producer is working in digital first productions and digital first style shows where you're not constrained by a typical cable or streaming outline episodic structure. You kind of have the freedom because of either the platform you're streaming to or the production company that you are a part of to build what makes sense, and not within a 30-minute, 45-minute, hour long kind of box that some other, more traditional style scripted, unscripted shows have to abide by. So when I found Dropout, part of the push towards Dropout was Marissa, who was on last week's episode, was like, you gotta watch Game Changer. They're doing some really cool stuff. But also, I wasn't really understanding the actual play genre, but I was seeing the numbers. And I was seeing just how many eyeballs were going on weekly drops from all kinds of actual play shows across the internet, across platforms. And I was like, okay, if there are millions of people tuning in weekly to this, there's something happening that my producer brain needs to understand. So I'm coming into this episode and into the conversation about Dimension 20 with the verbiage of this is a TV show. This is not just an internet series or an actual play series to tune into. This is a TV show. It's just the episodes are 2 to 3 hours long sometimes, and that is okay for the genre. My first question to you two, when you think about Dimension 20, how do you frame it in your brains? How does it fit in your viewing patterns or in the scope of what you're reviewing? What is Dimension 20 to you?
Rowan, you're the smart one.
So Dimension 20 to me, I think, is currently the peak example of a new medium of actual play, which has only existed for the last 15 to 20 years. Actual play as a genre, academic Evan Torner documented it being a recording of playtesting, so people on forums would share their experience playing games and being like, hey, this is how this experience went for this. How do we think we want to alter this game? Kind of like a more game design element. Now, it has moved. It started with Acquisitions Incorporated, which was in 2008, which was a live play from the Penny Arcade, where they did at PAX. They did huge live productions. And then moving from that, we then get a few different waves. We're currently the fourth or fifth wave of actual play in the last 15 years. Critical Role, huge in 2015, 2016, really boosted everything. And that showed a very actual play format of watching these really highly trained performers tell a story through this game. And now we're going from the live streamed version of actual play into a much more accessible version, which is a highly edited version of the medium. And this is like a inflection point, I think, in the shifting of where this medium goes from a really niche hobby that like, oh, this is a weird thing that you have to be really into to get, to a more accessible medium where people are like, oh, I can watch this show and feel like you said, I'm watching a TV show. I'm not just watching people play games. I'm being entertained. And so Dimension 20 is this shift in what is possible for actual play, I think.
Oh, I want to dive so far into what you just said, but I'm going to just zip my lips and let Jordon also answer this question before we keep the train
going.
going.
Why did I let Rowan go first? That was such a mistake. I know better than that. I can't be any better or smarter than what just happened. No notes. Rowan Z just coming in here.
To give you some credit, you're someone that is not just within the actual play like community of people thinking through how Dimension 20 exists across the genre, but you're also very, as we have discussed in detail, deep into Dropout and what Dropout specifically is doing. So maybe can you give us some perspective on how does Dimension 20 exist within this very specific like production house and streamer?
Yeah, I mean, Dimension 20 obviously is like the flagship show for Dropout, or at least was. I think arguably you could put Game Changer in that spot now as well. But certainly, certainly if you look at like merch available, it's Dimension 20 is their baby, right? Like, I think one of the things, Rowan, you talked about like the like highly edited style as opposed to like 4 hours of Critical Role doing whatever. We can go anywhere, tell any story we want, which, I mean, we still are seeing like Worlds Beyond Number. Brennan is still involved in it. You literally can do anything. I've got no notes. I've got no deadlines. But like with Dimension 20, we've got hey, we're going to have 20 episodes in the longest version of a season. We have built battle maps that you have to get to because 70 people have done hundreds of hours of work. And made truly the most astonishing pieces of art, like 3D interactable art that I've ever seen in my life. And I think, like that makes it, it's so at the same time so accessible to a viewer, inaccessible in terms of like what I could do in my home game. I mean, given like time and money, I guess I could remake like the mall map, but like a lot of time and a lot of money would be needed. But you can see that sort of like, I think there is then like an aspirational aspect of like, wouldn't it be cool if my game had maps this detailed and amazing? But also I can watch this like incredible art form of not only the performers, which like we've seen now for a bunch of years of like getting really talented performers, but also now incredibly talented production work behind it as well, in terms of lighting, visual effects, sound effects, editing, everything like just sort of like goes together. I remember this is such a deep cut. It's I think an adventuring party episode for Unsleeping City. I want to say 2 because I don't think they had it for 1. Yeah. Where it was a sound editor talking about like, oh, it was someone's ice magic. You should use like number from like this specific folder in their like drop down of like sound effects. And they discovered that they were pulling the one that they were using from that folder was one they had used earlier in the season or a different season, whatever. So that like the ice magic sound effects matched across the season. Like that level of detail.
We love intentionality.
Yes. Yeah.
I love it. There's so much to dig into, like, across all of these things. I think, like, let's start as big and as broad as we can possibly get, which is going back into some of what Rowan was just speaking to, which is the way that actual play as a genre, as a medium, as as a rapidly growing expansion of what is possible to produce.
Yeah.
I think about actual play from the sense of I don't know if there's a point in the history of actual play that is better suited to grow the genre than this. Because you're coming to a point where you have production houses like Dropout becoming more and more technical and more capable of getting this content to a global audience in a highly accessible way through multiple series that you can start from square zero at and progress to multi-series shows, multiple season shows like Fantasy High, to, as you've both stated, like the editing and being able to make it more concise and TV style produced, to just like, you know, having the foundation laid by convention, by people within the genre that, you know, maybe had no intention of becoming media personalities, internet personalities, but have found themselves there by virtue of their expertise in the space. So I feel like the rapid expansion and interest in actual play is matching this technical ability to make actual play really accessible and fun and exciting to be a part of. And as a producer, I'm watching that like, oh, this is going to be such a different conversation 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 2 years from now. We're going to be watching this shit 30 years from now saying, wow, do you remember in 2024 when Fantasy Eye's Dome had a big technical evolution versus what we're capable of doing now? So it's very exciting from that perspective. And Rowan, I know that you have had some incredible conversations specifically about this, and you've pulled some great quotes out of Brennan about this specifically. When you're thinking about the evolution of actual play, what stands out to you as like exciting things, or not even exciting, maybe worrisome things, I don't know, that are happening right now that are of note to you?
Yeah, a huge question. Definitely starting real broad up here.
Real broad.
I think one of the things that's most exciting for me about actual play is this shift towards intentionality in storytelling. Actual play very much has been, throughout its history, a group of friends at a table playing D&D. That is the vibe that you're getting. That's Critical Role's whole bag, is we're just a group of friends who happen to put a camera in front of us. Oh, look at that. But that couldn't be farther from the truth. They are very intentionally trained actors telling a very intentional story. And the more people coming into actual play who understand that, are bringing in that artistic intention, is shifting the medium from being, oh, there are just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of content of people recording their home games, which is really fun and has a place in the medium, towards, no, we are intentionally making art. We're going to keep in this dual layer, like reality TV show and narrative TV show. We're not going to get rid of one or the other, but we're going to synthesize them to create something new. Something that is a little worrisome about the future of actual play. I wrote a piece for Polygon about this, like the Hollywoodification of actual play. And now, just like you were saying, like you came into this as a TV producer realizing like, oh, there are eyeballs in this. There is a really engaged market that wants to see this become more popular. And so when any corporation comes in and sees a like basically folk art medium and goes, oh, these people in community with each other telling stories, how can I make money off of that? That is the thing that worries me the most. And narrowing it down, because this has happened before. There have been other moments, like I said before, where actual play got into prominence. There was Harmon Quest, and there were Rivals of Waterdeep. There were these big moments where actual play almost breached into the mainstream. But again, all we saw were a very specific perspective. All we saw were very specific stories being told. And what I'm really hoping is the more that actual play becomes prominent, the more we're going to be able to see these stories being told by the people who should be telling them. So people who haven't been able to tell stories in other mediums like film or TV because of these access barriers now have a medium where they can go, oh, I can tell my story the way I want to tell it. And that's what I'm really excited to see as it keeps growing.
Yeah, I think, we're seeing hopefully some of that and stuff like Desi Quest launching to huge fanfare of like, hey, here is an exclusively brown table, like that is, telling stories that you don't see typically. And, like as you were talking about that, I was thinking about like the Hollywoodification. There are fully celebrities in the actual play space, Brennan Lee Mulligan being in the top 3 at least. Arguably one. I don't know. Matt's probably still one.
Depends on which demographic you're talking about. I think, actually.
But yeah, and thinking about like this is something I've had a thought of. Like if Brennan Lee Mulligan's villain wasn't always capitalism, Brennan Lee Mulligan would be running like the most for-profit like actual play show at evil corporate headquarters wherever, insert evil corporate headquarters here, because they would see the numbers, Liz, that you saw and would be like, hey, here's $1 million, make an actual play for us, do whatever you want, but you are going to promote like our in-app purchases or whatever horrible thing that we need you to do. And to come back to sort of like my Dropout area, I think one of the things that is hopefully good is like Sam seems to be very intentional about like profit sharing last year, because they had a really successful year, and has been talking about, doing residuals for cast and crew. And that feels like the kind of thing that, like, I don't think Brennan's going to leave to go, work for, it's Amazon. I'm talking about Amazon, to go work for Amazon. But like Brennan and Izzy got a kid now. They got to think about money. So if Sam is able to be like, hey, Dimension 20 brought in all the money, here's a big portion of what we got back. Like that is the reason, as a reason to stay and a reason to keep your celebrities in this genre, telling the stories that, like I want to see Bria tell 100,000 more stories, because she is.
Plus
Yeah,
one. Sorry, full cut off.
No.
I will watch you till the end of the earth and back. Please continue, Jordon.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, my current hope is that, so I have no insider information. I will caveat with that, but based on pictures that crew members have been posting of people who live on Lopez Island with Rick Perry, who are currently in Los Angeles, I think Dimension 20 is currently spinning up for its next batch recording. And obviously, I'm hoping that Abria is one of those people that is coming in to tell another story. Again, I have no information. She does not share that information with me. She just yells at me on the internet. I want to see Abria and people like Abria who have not had the opportunity to tell the stories, come in and tell a sweet little story about cute little stoats. What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing could go wrong.
Nothing. And I also think that's where Dropout, and this is getting a little bit more zeroed in on like what Dropout's specifically doing in this space and the role that they have. Dropout's philosophy across their shows tends to be very talent incubator oriented. Like Sam is bringing in talent and helping grow that talent across shows. And one of the greatest joys of the past few months has been seeing people like Oscar. It was Oscar Appreciation Week just last week on Dropout. So if you're long in the future watching this, last week was when Oscar did double duty between Game Changer and Dirty Laundry. And it was really great to see someone like now bounce through a couple different shows within the Dropout genre. And it's not just Oscar. There's tons of people that have either started with Dimension 20 or bounced between or come on Dirty Laundry and then bounced in. And that's also a cool way of helping people come into the medium and not be like pigeonholed or type held by it. Rowan, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I actually can speak to this from a very personal perspective, because I started my whole career on the internet as a Brooklyn stand-up comedian. And so I know a lot of people who are in the Dropout sphere or are now moving into the Dropout sphere who I'm like, oh, I saw you in a basement in Brooklyn to a room of 4 people. And now I get to see you get your flowers and get exposed to this larger audience because you are one of the funniest people I've ever met. And so seeing how they're now using this platform to bring people up as opposed to just bolster their own celebrity is beautiful to watch.
Yeah, I think we can confidently say it's Iffy Appreciation Week this week. Iffy's got a new Game Changer tonight. Actually drops tomorrow night, right? We get a Tuesday night.
This is your plug to watch next week. The most feral Dropout Drop-In that may ever exist is me talking about how fabulous Iffy is for an hour straight. Something to look forward to in a future episode. I think he's the bee's knees, but please continue,
He's great.
Jordon.
He's great.
No, that's my whole point. Iffy's great.
And he's someone too that is kind of popped in and popped out around Dropout, right? It's very cool to see, and I don't just want to give all the credit to Sam, but it really is having someone at the top of the company very actively and outwardly saying that the talent support and the support of talent, not just within Dropout properties, but across their career is important to him. That's how you get people into a genre like actual play and into a tabletop setting, able to expose, hey, I'm really funny. Hey, I'm a really good storyteller. Hey, I'm a really good character actor. Hey, I have all these skills that I can expose with an actual play and then go use as a reference point to do other things and build other things. And hopefully all of us as viewers and everyone watching as viewers of Dimension 20 can take that note of the people coming onto the show have so much to offer and then go follow them throughout the different properties and things they're doing. I think that another thing that Dimension 20 has committed to in a way that other streamers are doing the opposite with right now is the idea of multiple seasons of a show. There are so many shows that did not get, and this is, I'm a jaded Shadow and Bone fan, okay? So I'm just gonna straight up cover what I'm about to say with that umbrella. But there are so many shows that don't get a season 3 or get their spin-off or get their time to really tell their story and drop it. Like seeing Fantasy High get a season 3 is so beautiful because we're getting things from the characters that we never would have gotten to in a season 1 or a season 2. And that's so important for like the evolution of not just this genre, but of television in general, to set a precedent that you have to give your characters and your talent space to evolve and breathe and really sink their teeth into it. So I'm curious for both of you watching Dimension 20 grow and also hone in on what makes it best. What do you see exciting in choices that are being made to grow Dimension 20, and what do you see as an opportunity for Dimension 20 to tap into?
Wait, can I go first? That Rowan doesn't sound so much smarter than me. Great. So yeah, I think obviously we've got Fantasy High Junior Year, a thing that like the fans have been asking for so very long, to the point where even though Allie Beardsley posted literal pictures with like the like Eggford Academy banners behind them, I still was like, I don't think it's going to be Junior Year, gang. I think that's just a weird thing that they have.
Red herring, everyone.
Yeah,
Look
yeah,
away.
Of course, yeah.
But like we also get, before we started recording, we talked about Dungeons and Drag Queens. We saw Mentopolis last year and Burrow's End. Never Stop Blowing Up is the next season, I presume, coming after this one. And each one, I think, because it leans so hard into genre of that season, allows for new people to come in. So my theory on Never Stop Blowing Up is that it's like an 80s 90s action movie where there are explosions constantly. I don't know what that means in terms of storytelling, but like whole new potential group of people who aren't super into actual plays but are super into those kinds of movies to like join and be like, oh, what wild story are they telling? What interactive blowing up map do they have like on the board with them?
Yeah, so I started watching Dimension 20 very early on, actually. I started watching it, I think, in 2019. So very, very early on, I saw what the production was. And something that I found really interesting in that they're doing is that they have evolved the medium so much in terms of what their storytelling capabilities are with their production. But yeah, like Jordon was just saying, the access points are huge, making it so, because actual play is a very inaccessible medium. I've been saying this word accessibility a lot, but it's so true. People do not have the time or the attention span or the desire to just watch an unedited version of people either on a remote screen or sitting around their table and just go. They want to be entertained. They want to make sure that their time, which is valuable, is being tended to properly. And like you were just saying about how shows are taking away seasons or like canceling shows before anyone can get actually like invested in them, Dropout cares so much about their audience. Dropout knows that the only reason they are able to exist is because of their audience. And so in doing so, they realize, especially like with the work that they did with Orion Black prior to this, what they're doing with Carlos Luna now, making sure that those audiences that they're accessing aren't just the same ones that actual play and TTRPGs have appealed to for the 50 years that they've been around, since TTRPGs have been around. So now, like with Dungeons and Drag Queens, you have this access point. Dungeons and Drag Queens is single-handedly the season of Dimension 20 or any actual play ever that has gotten the most people in my real life into the medium. I have gotten so many people to watch Dungeons and Drag Queens and then go, oh, and then watch other seasons. So many times. And the reason being is you are opening up this audience that's like, oh, this isn't for me. I've been told that this isn't for me. I wrote a whole article about it for Polygon. I wrote another article about gender in TTRPGs for Autostraddle. Queer people and marginalized people have always been at the forefront of artistic drive and at the forefront of evolving artistic mediums, and actual play is no different. And so not just utilizing the aesthetics of what their artistic achievements have been, of like, oh, this is a really cool editing idea, or oh, this is a really cool story theme that maybe we can explore, really incorporating marginalized identity within the structure of the show makes it accessible to so many more people. And like, yeah, Dungeons and Drag Queens is fucking great. Everyone should watch it.
Yes, 100%. And just into that specifically, one of the things about Dungeons and Drag Queens that I think is like, it's a moment that I think had such grand meaning into the genre as a whole. And I was just rewatching this yesterday. I found it so profound.
Did you say meaning or memeing? Because both are true.
Meaning, but I'm sure this also was a meme. That moment in episode 1 where Brennan is complimented about how great of a storyteller he is, and he kind of like takes that in, and there's kind of a moment to breathe and reflect on how, I think it's like an hour and 40 minutes or so, it's like quite far into the episode, how accessible Brennan has made the game up and until that point, to complement the additions the players brought into the episode, to not shame them for not knowing what a specific role was supposed to be or where their number was on their character sheet, and then to honor the storytellers that were brought in, even if they did not know the genre specifically. It's a moment that always catches me because it's so gracious to Brennan and then it's so gracious back to the players. And that's something that makes you feel as a viewer like, oh wow, this is a give and take of, it's not someone who knows the game so intimately trying to help people play it. It's kind of like intense and kind of very detailed oriented and it has to be a specific way. It's very like, no, like if you're a storyteller, if you're a performer, if you're an artist, there's a space for you at the literal table and within the genre. And now I want like 20,000 seasons of Dungeons and Drag Queens and different drag artists doing.
We're getting to season 2 at least.
Yeah.
Season 2 and 1,000 more to go. Sam, greenlight it now. We're ready for it.
Something that I think is also really interesting is, as an actual play reporter, when people ask me, the normal conversation of like, oh, what do you do for work? I go, I'm an actual play reporter. And they go, what's that? And I go, well, do you know what a TTRPG is? And they go, well, what's that? And I go, okay, have you heard of Dungeons and Dragons? And they go, kind of. And so I have to work all the way back to bring them up to speed. And that's what Dungeons and Drag Queens does so well. Like you were just saying, it really is an onboarding for not just actual play, but what tabletop role-playing games can do. Because you see these queens go from like, I have no idea what's going on, I'm making some jokes, to the end of 4 episodes, which is no time at all, go, oh, I am in love with this game, and I'm having a really deeply emotional moment.
Yeah,
and
it
it's
happens.
beautiful.
I mean, that happens so quickly too. That like you see the like deeply emotional moments from all of them. But yes, even by the end of like, oh, we've told a story that never existed until like these last 2 days, probably however long they shot it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's the Mark Ronson of it all, right? Like Brennan is coming in there and being like, "You said something wild. That wild thing exists now," and like getting to see new people learn of like, I said it and now it exists. That's the power of like collaborative storytelling. Was so fun. Not only getting to see it, but then they just verbalized it, like you said, Liz, of like complimenting Brennan of like, hey, you just did this. Like you made the story that I said come to life and be real. It's so a beautiful moment. And yeah, and I mean, that season as well, I mean, that's when I started seeing coverage in like NPR of like, hey,
one of the top shows of the year according to NPR. Rowan, there's actually an incredible quote from Brennan that you got out of him in your interview that like I want to tap into before we talk about Fantasy High specifically. And it was within, I think maybe the last answer he gave you, it's not the things that divide these mediums, but unite them. And then he continued on that thought to say actual play is a return to something very primal. Oh, that just like...
Yeah.
I think about that all the time. It is so grounded in something that surpasses genre and medium and what Dropout's capable of doing. It takes a visionary to have that kind of grounded understanding of what you are actually advancing with your work. When you heard Brennan say that, like from a selfish perspective, I want to know like what, like, did that strike you in that moment? And then can you like reflect on that a little bit maybe in the work that you've done across this space?
Wait, real quickly, can I say that I was so excited because on a recent episode of Worlds Beyond Number, Brennan said he loves, I think it may have been an actual play, an adventure party, whatever, it doesn't matter. He said that he loves all kinds of conversation, small talk, like deep philosophical stuff and other stuff. And I was like, yes, if I ever get
That's
to
my
interview
in.
Brennan, it won't be the worst thing ever because I'm never going to hit the Rowan bar. But maybe he will still at least maybe enjoy the conversation that I have with him. Rowan, talk about how great you are.
Really did set the bar at an astronomical level to the rest of us. But honestly, like, all the power to you. Yes, as you should.
I'm so sorry. It's a nightmare in my brain. I think about things too much all the time. But no, Brennan is such a gift as a reporter and an interviewer because he provides so much thought that has clearly gone into this prior that like he can just access at any moment. That's also decades of improv experience that goes into that as well, and philosophy and all of the other things that he's studied in his life. And LARP. Let's not forget LARP. LARP is very important.
100%. Yes.
But listening to him in that moment was something that I have thought about storytelling for a very long time. That's why I think stories are so important. That's why I'm doing this work. Like, I know that there are so many things going on in the world right now. There are so many things that need people's attention, that need fixing, because the world is fucked and broken, as I said in my interview with Jordon at our little round table. But storytelling is so essential to human survival. Humans at our base are just people who sat around a campfire and told each other stories. And that is at the heart of how we connect to people. When you're listening to someone talk about their day, they're telling you a story. When you're like just kind of riffing with someone, you're telling a story. And at that core is what makes life worth living, in my opinion. And so this idea of what tabletop is it is the most streamlined version of that, of watching that happen. So like as film and television, you don't really get that. You see the final production of all of the work that's gone before it. You have gone through the process of, oh, we're in a writer's room telling each other to a story, to the editing of a script, to the final production of filming, and then everything else. In actual play, you're watching that in real time. You are watching the magic of collaborative storytelling happen in that moment. And there's this experience that is called narrative transport, in which the literal brain waves that you have when you are listening to a story match up with the person who is telling you the story. And the memories you make while stories are being told, the memories that you make while stories are being told are no different from the memories you make living your real life. That is like a neurological truth. And so that's what I think tabletop games and actual play is really hitting on, is that immersive storytelling truth that everyone just seeks all of the time.
And I think one of the things that like specifically Dimension 20 and like actual plays like really capitalizes on with that is because we as the audience are watching the story play out in like real time, an unscripted story. It feels like, because we get to see the story unfold at the same time that the players do, it feels like we're a part of it. Like I also just learned that, you know, I also just learned the fate of Squeam, right? Like I'm also like, I also got to see him make the crystal call back to them, right? Like I also got to experience that the same way Emily did. And I think it makes a dangerous parasocial thing happen, but a very like powerful storytelling thing happen of like, oh, I'm getting this. Yeah, they shot it a year ago, but in the same way that they're learning it as it is unfolding in front of them, I am experiencing that together with them.
Mm-hmm.
And makes an incredible community and why it's so powerful.
You said parasocial, and I was like, oh god, I have a whole thing I could go off, but I'm just going to bring that back in.
There's a whole other episode the three of us could do about the parasocial relationships that this genre builds. Oh boy, I also am reining it in my head. So parking that thought. I want to talk about Fantasy High, but literally 23 minutes before we were set to record, there was a very cool announcement about Fantasy High, so I want to make sure that we flag it for everyone in case you missed it. The Fantasy High Freshman Year Minis auction begins March 4th, which is very soon. There will be 85 minis, maxis, and tableau to be auctioned off across 3 waves. Auction.dropout.tv. There's all kinds of info on the Dimension 20 Instagram account, and 100% of profits generated from the auction are going to be donated to PCRF.net. which is great. And you can find all kinds of information about advocating for a ceasefire in Gaza at ceasefire-now.com, and that's also all in the description of this post on the Dimension 20 Instagram page that you can find. I will say, and I'm also flagging this as a Canadian, that shipping is US only, so everyone go find an American friend to get your thing shipped to for you.
Get in my DMs. I'll send you. You
Jordan
send me
Brown
the.
will personally
Send me,
email.
just Venmo me $10,000, and I will buy the mini for you. What could go wrong?
We'll put your like Cash App on the screen, just like they did on Game Changer last week, and see how much people transfer you.
You're gonna be the cut article. I got scammed out of $50,000 by a CIA agent. That's gonna be Jordon Brown next week.
I have no minis and no cash. Yeah,
I got scammed out of my corn guy cutie by Jordan Brown. Yeah, it'll be great. Oh my god. Okay, let's talk about Fantasy High. And this is like a spoiler alert for Fantasy High if you are behind on Fantasy High. If you have not seen Junior Year, if you haven't seen Fantasy High at all, I recommend you just watch those many hours of content back. But if you're okay with spoilers, feel free to keep listening and watching.
And also to let everyone, we're at episode 7. We've finished episode. So if you're watching this in the future, we can't spoil anything past that for you.
Great flag, because I'm sure there's big things coming that future episodes of Drop-In will cover. But as per today, I feel like this is a cool moment to stop and reflect on the show, because 7 episodes in, we've seen some really cool technical changes to how Fantasy High is being made. And we cannot credit the success of Fantasy High Junior Year without talking about Abria and Burrow's End, because Burrow's End gave us some of the coolest evolutions of set and stage and even costuming and makeup design that we've seen on Dimension 20. So why don't we just pause there and allow Jordon to speak to the blood feud with Abria momentarily, thinking about what they accomplished on Burrow's End from a technical perspective and looking at Fantasy High Junior Year. What is standing out to you about where Dimension 20 is taking their production?
I mean, I think the easiest connection between those two is the dome itself, because Burrow's End was the first time they had the new dome, the permanent location. It's the first time they really, well, I don't know if first time, but they really leaned into projections in terms of incorporating the story on the walls. And with Junior Year, especially, Kate May, the artist who's done all of the character art, also did all of the art that you're seeing on those projections. And Derek Christensen and Ruby O'Brien are animating that so that flags are blowing in the wind or whatever. And I don't understand how you can do that.
When they say who growl, it flashes. So cool.
Good.
So good.
So cool.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's the easy one to be here is a definite thing that you can see the building blocks of. I have no idea the timing in terms of how many sets were built for before Brennan saw Polly the Bear versus when he needed to shoot them all. But obviously we're seeing an evolution of what they can do in terms of set building. I mean, it's been going for a little while now, but we really have seen it in Burrow's End and Junior Year.
Yeah, I think the thing that I was just, if anyone watching the video saw, I was just looking off to the side a little bit. I was trying to find, there's an incredible video essayist who does some really beautiful critical work into actual play. His name is Castlecaster. He did a piece about how Abria Iyengar changed Dimension 20 forever. Really fantastic piece. Highly recommend everyone listening go check it out. Spoke specifically to Misfits and Magic. The first time where, spoilers for Misfits and Magic, there is someone in the background on a projector that they thought was just a projection, and it's actually a shadow puppet kind of vibe, which ties directly to Burrow's End. But that was during O'Brien D. Black's tenure as creative director. And so we see this through line of this production advancement by creating a more immersive experience in the dome for the players, so that way the audience at home can experience that alongside. As Gina McCran describes in her Dicebreaker piece about Candela Obscura, there's this phenomenon in actual play called the first audience, in which the people at the table are the audience for what is going on during the show. And so their reactions as a first audience inform how the audience watching the show, the second audience, should relate and engage with what is going on. And so that is something that I think Dimension 20 has really, really leaned into. I had a conversation with Carlos Luna recently in which he said his philosophy for the production is that everything that the production does is meant to support and buttress the performances of the players at the table. And so that comes down to production. We see like a very big difference between Unsleeping City in the first seasons and Fantasy High, where it was roleplay episode, combat episode, roleplay episode, combat episode, and the narratives were much more forced to go in a specific direction. Whereas now we're seeing it kind of adapt to what the players are going to be doing and incorporating itself much more organically. So these projections, these sound designs, all of these things are made with the explicit intention to support the performances of the players, which I think is a brilliant way to approach this.
Yeah, as Carlos Luna has described it, like, my job is to make sure that Dimension 20 can keep Dimension 20ing. Like, that's what he does. And he does such a good job at it.
Such a good job. One advancement on that note that I've really taken note of as someone that I am new coming into Dimension 20, and that all of the context I have, I've watched Dimension 20 just over the last calendar year. So it's like I have a very clear thought in my head of how this evolution has happened, because I have binge watched everything in a year time frame. But watching the evolution from season 1 to season 2 to season 3, right? Season 1 is this edited, entertaining, less gatekeepy kind of approach to the genre, which is very fun to watch if you're new and you have the sets and you have the minis, and it's fun. And then you see season 2, which was the live take on it, where it's not edited, and talk about getting it in real time with the players. It's not more live and in real time than that. You're seeing Zach Ariyama show up late because he forgot they were filming, and someone gets up to take a bathroom break and misses something. Like, it is as live and real as it possibly gets. And within that, you're constrained to live camera ops, where you have like these different boxes that you're shifting the shots through depending on who's speaking. And if you're not looking at a tiny corner of your screen, you miss Murph laughing at what M did, or you're missing, Beardsley laugh at what M did. A lot of people just reacting to all the shit that M pulls in this game. And then you see season 3, and this is what's really making me excited about bringing actual play and traditional TV production together. You see these post-production decisions come in and really amplify the performer decisions, like having that really subtle, you miss it if you're not looking for it, like two like blue outlined grid, where you see like Murph's close up beside Brennan's when Murph is rolling and talking about this, or you have Lou's face and then Fabian's character sheet side by side in these side by side grids. And I love the evolution of like just gently introducing people into what a post-production edit can add to the performance. It is such a unique take on producing a show like this that has traditionally been so like, no, we're capturing it and we're putting it out, and we're not adding to it. We are just taking what they did and displaying it and putting it out there. I think
people are mad about that. There's a whole section of the actual play community that is angry at the fact that it is going edited. And I'm like, hey, y'all, the world changes. We're moving forward. Come on, get it together.
I will say one of the things that I love, because I'm also team edit all the way, is the obviously like battle edits that we get of like the close-up shots of the minis that Casey McGeorge and Raven Bartlett primarily are shooting. I talked to Kevin Stiller, DP of Dimension 20, and he talked about like the rig that he made for like because they had one. And it like started to break down, and they didn't have the equipment. The equipment doesn't get made anymore, so he spent a year figuring out the best possible like way, like camera, everything, lenses, stuff, and to the point where like now they can just if this is the mini they want, the camera can be here, right? Like there is no gap that they have anymore. He's made this like magical thing, and I was chatting with KC about their work on the first fight with the Night Yorb, and they said like, did the Fabian shot where he's riding his motorcycle stay in? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, that's one of my favorite. That's my favorite shot I've ever done. Because they put pencils in the wheels and dragged the motorcycle up so that it looks like it was driving. And the funny thing to me is, because that has become so standard for Dimension 20, no one talked about that shot. Like 4 years ago, everyone would have been talking about that shot. Like of like, oh my gosh, the motorcycle was moving. That's so incredible. It looked like he was really riding it. And now literally not a comment about it. Casey's favorite shot they've ever done.
I think that's the thing about when you get more advanced in production. The best thing about technical craft is when you don't notice it and it just does its job.
Mhm.
You're like, oh, this creates a more immersive experience. This is making it so that way it's amplifying the story we're trying to tell. You're not going to notice it because you're going to be so immersed and lost in the story being told that you're not going to see the little swan feet kicking under the water.
Yeah.
And that's where you really get into the conversation around advancing a genre and maintaining the integrity of a genre. And you have your diehard, long-term, deeply invested community members that see changes and do not want them or advocate against them or feel some kind of way about them. And honoring that reaction while gently exposing what can be, I think is so beautiful. And I feel like if I could give a hot take, one of the best decisions that Dimension 20 ever made is Abria bringing in the bear set. Because the bear set is something that is
I don't know how this is a hot take.
Because
you're just giving us
you're
facts.
like, yeah, the bear was fucking great, and it was. From a production standpoint, it's a shocking, unattainable choice to people that are in this genre and playing themselves. We cannot all build gory, multi-dimensional bears to place our minis within that have effects and lights added to them in post. Like, the whole bear fight scene production was so insane and so reliant on technical evolution. And that's a commitment. Like, once Dropout does that, they can't show us Fantasy High Junior Year and say, okay, well, we're back to what we did in season 1. Because we're all going to go, well, why the fuck did we get a bear in Burrow's End that was that intricate and had these
beating
beautiful
heart? Like, where? Give me motion.
Right? Once you have a taste of something, you can't take it away, or if you do, you chance people getting angry in an opposite direction. So I really applaud like how these technical evolutions and these choices are being gently presented to us as viewers, because even something like showing the two shot like Murph and Riz's character sheet, or Brennan and Murph side by side and not the full table, those are, from a technical perspective, not hard things to do in post, but it is gently being added to Fantasy High to show us what's possible as we evolve and evolve and evolve over time.
And I think what's so cool, another part of the conversation I have with Carlos, again, subscribe to Rascal if you want to read the full interview. But one of the coolest things about that was this understanding that he had that you can't always push. You can't always try to advance things and make things bigger and better, because that's how we get this capitalist hellscape that we're in right now. Like, not everything needs to be a growth-oriented mindset. They're at this place right now where they know they're at the top of the industry. They know they're at the top of the medium and doing the coolest technical things that can be done in it right now. And they're happy with that. And from my understanding, I'm not going to speak for them by any means, but it seems like they're now in a place where they are riding out their successes and making that sustainable and consistent rather than trying to continually push and grow.
Yes. And there's something...
You say that, but who knows what Abria is going to pull when she comes back to the dome, because she asks for something every time and is like, hey, can we cut a hole in the table? And so far they've said no, but maybe this is the time they say yes.
Can we get pyrotechnics in the studio before everything blows up all the time?
Well, that's what's so beautiful about being in the position that Dimension 20 is in, to be at the front of a genre and be able to choose the rate at which they make these choices, right? It would be very easy, and this is coming from someone that I walk into a set and I just evaluate a current state and immediately my brain pitches craziest possible outcome and work backwards from there. So I am constantly being disruptive as fuck in sets I walk into and saying, why aren't we doing the most advanced thing we could possibly do? Like, explain to me why we're not doing that choice so that I can understand where we are right now and why we're here right now. And to see Dimension 20, like, they can shoot so far technically into the future if they wanted to. Like, there are so many huge technical choices that could be in a year, 2 years, 3 years from now if they decide they want to go there, or could be right now if they decide that they wanted to spend the money there. So to see them make the choice to say, no, Burrow's End, we're making changes to the dome and we're introducing an interactive like landscape and setting to the show, and then we're going to advance that in junior year with like Hoot Growl graphics appearing when we do Hoot Growl, like, because we know that's something that will come up in the story. It's very, very cool to see that speed and that pace be like gently prodded forward. And I'm just so excited to see, like, if they're filming now for something that, let's just say, comes out at the end of the year or comes out even start of next year, it's like they're making choices in 2024 that will be 2025 genre defining moments, and then the choices they make in December will define 2026 and so on and so forth.
And what's so cool is, like, you mentioned DesiQuest before. DesiQuest, you see the Dimension 20 model being used for a new show. We get Michael Schumacher, who is making Dimension 20, again, also making DesiQuest, and you see this parallel experience happening. You're like, oh, this, I know this. It feels so intimate and familiar to me. But then you get new additions as well. Like in DesiQuest, there's an experience where there are one-on-one conversations with the DM, where the characters go off into a side room and they have this conversation. And we haven't seen that on Dimension 20 yet, but that is a tool that they could easily incorporate if they wanted to. But we see that Dimension 20 has now set the bar for what is possible, and people can now build on that as well. Like, this is a community collaborative art form that has to acknowledge the past that it came from to keep going forward, just like anything else.
And has to acknowledge what's happening across in current state. If another show decides to make a huge, bold technical choice, like, I can't even think of an example right now, but let's just say pyrotechnics, right? Like, if another show is like, we're going to do extreme pyrotechnics and fireworks every episode, then that's something that Dimension 20 has to make a choice in response to. And that also propels the genre forward, which is really exciting when you see multiple shows emerge and create audiences and have success. So it's also exciting from that perspective. Like, discoverability and accessibility have never been so available for people. It's never been so easy to find new shows to follow and join new communities around actual play. So I hope that over the next year, there's also a little bit of that competitiveness start to emerge, where people go, hey, we saw this on this other show. Like, we want to see that here. We saw this choice and we hated it. Don't ever do that here. Like, that also helps everyone grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've been talking for a long time, and I could talk about this all day with you too. Let's do some
Also
wild
same.
speculation about Fantasy High. We're 7 episodes in. We will be able to come back and see how our predictions stand over the test of time. But what do we think is going to happen with this season of Fantasy High? Jordan, do you think there's more grape jelly in the future?
Obviously, we're going to have more grape jelly. Great addition to an bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich. Justice for Lou. Justice for Lou. The audacity.
As a New Yorker, I'm offended. I know. Listen, this man went to Boston for college. No. He can't speak to me about grape, egg, and cheese. No.
Delicious. I doubt we see more sandwiches, but I love a good sandwich party on any episode that they do. But yeah, I mean, what I expect from this season. So the thing that I'm really curious about this season is how many more stress token episodes we're going to get. Because obviously we'll get at least one more. You don't make that mechanic and then not do it again. But like, do we get one more? Is like, I think my speculation is 2 more of those. We get one sort of middle, and then like episode 19-ish, maybe like a shorter version of it. But like, I think we'll get 2 more downtime episodes of like, hey, how much stress can you build in one season? What happens when you get to the maximum number of stress tokens you can get? And because Brennan wants them to get the red stress token and do whatever nasty thing he has planned for them. I love the stress mechanic.
So some interesting insight on the stress mechanic. That is a mechanic, I think, ported in from Blades in the Dark, which is a heist-based game, which is really, really fun. Anyone listening to this who plays TTRPGs, Blades in the Dark is a great steampunk heist setting that you can get into. Fantastic. Also very excited to see that. I'm excited to see them keep incorporating more mechanics and more games that aren't just D&D, because I think that D&D is very limited in the type of storytelling it can tell just because of what it is. Like, the Kids on Bikes system got to tell a very different kind of story with a very different kind of pacing just because of the mechanics that it is. And so they are all very intentionally minded people who know what's going on in the scene, so I'm sure we're going to see that develop. Not necessarily for Fantasy High this season, because my predictions about Kristen exploring her spirituality did in fact come up very, very prominently, and I'm very glad that it did. But also, Allie didn't give me shit during our interview about that, so good on them. Something I'm really interested to see if Dropout does explore in the future, though, is shorter seasons, is like feature length seasons. Because I think the future of accessibility for actual play is going to be, again, getting shorter and tighter with the storytelling that we're doing. And so there are some really fantastic one-shots that are like 1 to 3 hours long that tell an entirely encapsulated story in the way a film or TV show can in one episode. And Dropout of anyone is so capable of doing that with the type of performers and artists that they have available on their team. And so I'm very excited to see after Dimension 20, Drag Queens 2, and the next seasons that they have, if that is going to be where they're moving in the future towards these like really accessible feature-length actual plays that you can go, hey mom, hey dad, hey cousin, hey coworker, boss, whoever. You can just watch this, spend one night, watch the entire thing, and get what this actual play thing is. So that's what I'm excited to see for in the future.
Yeah, if anyone has listened to Worlds Beyond Number, A County Affair, you know how good a like 1 to 4 hour game can be. Truly the hardest I've ever laughed while listening to an actual play. And shout out to Roll for Shoes, a system that is the wildest thing that I've ever experienced.
Roll for shoes. You roll for shoes.
Roll for shoes.
I love these predictions. I have such a boring one in comparison to what you have both just flagged, but as you know, if you watched episode 1 last week, I attempt to take notes when I watch Dimension 20, and eventually I just get so immersed, to go back to that word, in the episode that my notes become useless. So, Rowan, I don't know if you saw our episode last week, but last week the only note I took was about how great Zach's lighting was, followed by this photo of my TV of Zach. So I'm very much still in that mindset of like, I get so distracted by like, wow, like Zach is really beautifully lit, or like, wow, like I really liked the way the camera did a slow zoom on Lou this episode, or like, wow, I really like that like Brennan like motioned in a certain way and the camera caught it from this angle. Like I'm very caught up in the technical things I like about this season compared to other seasons. So keeping in that vein, I think that there's like a few technical choices that are showing their colors this early on that I'm excited to see go like to the moon in terms of how far they'll stretch. One is lighting. I feel like we're gonna have a lot more fun with lighting this season than maybe we have in other seasons. It's already feeling more dynamic, and with those like immersive backdrops and even like the kind of color codedness of like when we were in the mall, it was like blue and everything was very cold, and then when it's nighttime, it's very softer and more dramatic lighting versus daytime, and the school is very bright and like cartoony. So from a technical level, I'm like, lighting designers, shout out to you. I feel like they're pushing it this season in a really cool way. I also am looking a lot at the performances this season, and I feel I have nothing to prove this. This is total speculation on my end, but I feel like Brennan's really pushing the performances differently than he has in past seasons. And I think the stress mechanic is part of it, forcing people to give bigger and more frequent moments in episodes versus maybe hiding in more reserved characteristics of their characters. And eventually that's going to boil up into something crazy. So I'm wildly speculating that the performances this season are going to go big, and that terrifies me because Emily's at the table and is already so big and what the fake performance is. So bigger and better performances accompanied by episodes of other Dropout content that shows us the range that these people have to offer, like Zach Oyama on very important people this week who gave us
everybody give me a little clap.
So much. But we'll come back to that conversation next week. We'll dig into more with Jordon's exclusive podcast with Vic and the latest updates around what's happening with very important people. We'll talk more about Fantasy High, as always, over the coming weeks. We've reached the top of an hour, which is incredible. I want to thank you both for your time and your thoughts on this exciting evolution for Dimension 20 and for Dropout. I'll toss it to Rowan first. Rowan, where can people find you on the internet, and what can people look forward to hearing and seeing from me in the coming weeks?
Yeah, you can find me on pretty much every social media platform at Rowan Zioli, or you can follow Rascal News at rascal_news wherever the social media is. You can also subscribe directly at rascal.news, where I am going to be giving all of my actual play thoughts. I already have a couple reviews on Faster Purple Worm Kill Kill, and I have a pretty scathing review of Marvel's Multiverse one-shot where they hired Glass Cannon Network to advertise their new TTRPG system in a way that I think they had a lot more money that they could have done some really interesting production things with, and they didn't.
Yeah. Jordon, you've got a lot coming out on your platform soon, which is very exciting. Anything you want to tease for the folks listening?
Sure. So I'm at the Jordon Brown over on TikTok, and I guess this is probably a good week if you want to come find me on Patreon, because this Friday, probably there will be an interview with Dropout CEO Sam Reich dropping on my Patreon. The only reason that it wouldn't be is if he gives me some like wild scoop that I have to like sit on until I'm allowed to release it. I don't know because I haven't talked to him yet, but assuming that that is the case, you will see that interview Friday. I also have an interview with Ify Wadiway, new host of Actually, coming out very, very soon as well. Along with a million other interviews on there.
So you can catch up on Jordon's content.
Apologies to Colleen for how many times I email you a week.
Again, shout out to Colleen doing the hard work, backbone of publicity at Dropout. And I'm Producer Liz. Of course, you can find me everywhere on the internet at Producer Liz. And if you're watching this, you've already found this on YouTube, which is very exciting. So you can subscribe to all 3 of our YouTube channels. They're in the description. And, subscriptions on YouTube really help those of us in the independent space monetize our platforms, which is important. And I want to just again commend rascal.news for launching last week because folks, supporting independent journalism is so important. It doesn't matter where you live in the world. Subscribe to the news that matters to you because that is how everyone gets to do their job and do their work. So if you enjoyed anything you heard this week, subscribe to us, subscribe to Rascal News, follow Jordon on Patreon, and we will be able to make more content for you. But coming up next week on the Dropout Drop-In, new season of Actually coming out this week. A thrill. Game Changer continues, Fantasy High continues, and we're going to catch up on very important people because I think we all had very vivid and loud reactions to what Zach Oyama gave us last week, so we're going to have to spend a lot of time just dissecting what happened.
Just unpacking and processing, yeah.
It's going to be group therapy next week on Dropout. You'll also get to hear me talk about how much I love Iffy because I think he's one of the greatest comedians on the planet. So if that's of interest to you, stick around next week. And that's all for us. Thank you for dropping in to the Dropout Drop-In. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.